Hey there, this is Sky with Gopher Games. I'm here with Olson, another Gopher, and we're just going to do a Tuesday Tactics thing, which we're just starting. We're going to talk about some of the new leaks for 10th edition for 40k. I'm just going to introduce Olson to this whole article and let him react to it in all his Rune Priestly glory. Okay. Are you ready, Olson?
I sure am.
Okay, so the title's Leaders now join squads to personally deliver powerful boons in the new Warhammer 40k. Um, the new edition of 40. So basically, yep, it's about how characters interact with subordinates.
Okay.
So they say the powerful aura bonuses that they used to impart to all nearby troops are gone in almost all cases. These effects were powerful, but the potential to stack them up made balancing the game tricky. So now, rather than handing out rerolls to anyone in earshot, your heroes now join a single squad and act as one cohesive unit. It's an elegant system that helps keep overbuff super units at bay. So, my immediate takeaway is like, okay, so it's kind of like 7th edition? Thoughts?
Well, I think it is going to be like 7th edition, where characters are hidden inside. You're going to get rid of some of the, I don't want to call it goofy because I thought it was fine, but some of the weird things where a character stands out in the open in between two units in order to hit both units for the auras. But that creates some other problems because while we don't have all the information yet, I don't think we used to back in 7th edition create these Death Stars of you take a giant unit. You don't really care what it is as long as there's a bunch of models. And then you stick as many characters as you can in it. That created some problems back in the day.
Yeah, I remember Seer Council. Friggin' Seer Council was the bane of my existence for a long time as an orc player.
As a Marine player, I had more than one Death Star. There was the Space Wolf one, which was take a bunch of Fenrisian wolves, which are fast, which is the good part, but they weren't necessarily good. But you had this fast unit that you could hide a bunch of fast characters in, which means you were like running around basically at maximum speed with these characters, and the wolves were just extra wounds.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of exploits. We'll see how they try to make those not happen. Okay, I'm going to keep going here.
Okay.
So we have a Primaris Lieutenant. Um, so let's see. While this model is leading a unit, weapons equipped by models in that unit have the Lethal Hits ability. We don't really know what that is yet.
I assume it's reroll ones to hit. Or to wound, excuse me.
Yeah, I think so too. Or something like that. This model's unit is eligible to shoot and declare a charge in a turn in which it fell back.
Okay.
It's very Ultramarines, but okay.
Honestly, while that is, it's also very Death Watch. Death Watch was all about taking a unit, and depending on which weird model you added to the unit, the whole unit gained a bonus ability of fall back and shoot, or advance and charge, or things like that. So that seems almost kind of Death Watchy, which I don't mind.
Okay, so we got some details here. So it's a leader ability, which it has like core colon leader. I guess there's gonna be like leader type units. Makes sense. Which unlocks the
Okay.
ability to join a squad. This is done before deployment, at the same time as transports are allocated and units are placed in reserve. The leader becomes a permanent member of that unit for the whole battle, which is a little odd because I remember seeing something about when the last squad they're attached to dies, they become their own unit. But maybe I read that wrong.
Well, either way, while that is relevant information, the thing that I got distracted on there was the fact that it was core leader. Because if we get rid of all the auras, which were supposed to be restricted to like core units, got to the benefit. Now that all of those are gone, does that mean that only certain units get to take leaders, or does that mean that core is now doing something else entirely?
Okay, so
Maybe
there's
that's a part of like the list build restriction.
so that's like
Who
the
knows?
next thing here.
Oh, okay.
So each leader has a short selection of units they can join, all of them listed on their data sheet. So a Primaris Lieutenant can shack up with Intercessors, Blade Guard veterans, but leaves Gravis Armored Aggressors and Heavy Intercessors to his more appropriately equipped colleagues. So I guess like captains would go with Gravis Armor, like Gravis Armor captains go with the Gravis Armor guys.
Interesting. So I don't mind that. That prevents some of the issues we had back in the day, right? Because you'd have, like a bunch of Thundercav guys going with Fenrisian Wolves to create this big Death Star. And like somewhere in that, you usually had like a Psyker with a jump pack so that he was fast enough to keep up, but he wouldn't have matched the unit type. So that already seems like a thing that's preventing some of the nonsense we had back in 7th. I don't know that I'm a fan of that per se, because I feel like there's certain units that, at least with our current model range, don't have any equivalent, which means nothing could join them, even though it totally makes sense that like something could. So an example there would be like the Primaris jump guys, the Interceptors, I think is the right word there. They have the weird Primaris jump packs, right? But we don't have any characters with that other than I think the named Raven Guard guy. So if they make it to where he could join that unit because they're just a regular, like, fast attack unit, like anyone could join them, that makes sense. To have only one guy who's allowed to join them, even though there's like logically no reason that a captain couldn't join them because he doesn't have the same type of jetpack, like a firstborn jetpack maybe or something like that, seems a little weird.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Okay, so we're gonna keep going here. The okay, so it goes on a little bit. So lethal hits basically means 6s to hit, auto wound, whatever.
Okay.
I forget which friggin' bolt rifle that's like, but I don't care anymore. There's so many 6 to hit auto wounds, a 6 to wound auto wounds, or whatever.
6 to hit auto wounds, 6 to hit counts as 2 hits instead of 1. Yeah, there's a bunch of variations on the roll of 6 and get a bonus.
A 6 to hit generates an auto wound and still then rolls like continues normal. Yeah, there's whatever. So most of the time only one leader can join each unit, but the lieutenant is an exception and can join the same squad as a captain, etc. Okay, so basically they needed somewhere to stuff all the friggin' lieutenants because there's 1 million lieutenants now. So there's that. It's kind of an interesting way to make the 28 lieutenants they've printed make sense. The old lookout serve rule changed too. The leaders kept safe by their bodyguards and can usually be targeted only when everyone else in the squad has breathed their last. So you have to like wipe the squad they're attached to before you get to them.
Mm-hmm. Unless like sniper rifle or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. And then
So I will go backwards slightly there. The fact that it says only, I understand this is an example, so they're probably going to have more information here, right? Because we don't have full information on everything. But the fact that they said only one leader could be per unit, and leader is the keyword that lets you attach. It's not like we have information and there's multiple keywords that allow you to attach to a unit. But the fact that each unit only gets one leader, and then, except for like lieutenant, either this seems a little misleading to me in that there's a bunch of exceptions, or this seems almost overly restrictive and it's going to hurt theme for certain factions. Because like if you look at Guard, for example, having a Primaris Psyker in the unit and then also having a Commissar in the unit, they're both leaders, and thematically almost every like Primaris Psyker has a Commissar behind him, right? Like if you Perils of the Warp, I'm just going to shoot you. Like that's how we stop that. So like it's super themey, and there's been rules throughout 40K that have indicated that thing. So either that has to become an aura, or which they said that they're getting rid of almost entirely, or there's should be way more exceptions than just lieutenants to this multiple leader thing. But I do like the limit on leaders, because it does prevent some of the stuff that we had in 7th. I just don't know if that preventing the issues we had in 7th should be so extreme that it doesn't make sense anymore, even within its own universe.
Right. So I'm thinking of something else too. In a way, like, if you don't have just a stacking aura kind of thing, then sniper's less effective, and also people are going to be shoving max-sized squads to attach characters to more often, rather than MSU flood auras everywhere that we see a lot now.
Right.
But it's also going to, like, sort of, in a way that ends up incentivizing Blast in the ecosystem more, maybe? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that works out, because Blast is still a rule. I don't know if it's going to be exactly the same, but I have a feeling it will be.
I think it will be too, and I think it should be, because that's a good balancing factor against someone trying to horde. That being said, I think it totally depends on the faction, because, like, if you can only put one leader in there, yeah, you can't stack bonuses because they're not auras anymore, but I don't know that it's worth buying, like, a max gaunt unit to stick one character in, because while the bonus may be good, the reason I wanted so many characters in the past was because of the stacking. The minute you get rid of the stacking, it, like, at that point, I'd rather have, like, a 10-man gaunt squad and just use them as extra wounds to, like, protect my character as it gets across the field, because all I really care about is the character. Like, the bonus almost seems irrelevant for certain factions at that point.
Yeah, it makes me wonder too, like, if the faction-specific, like, bodyguard characters get something in addition to what just attached to a thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so not all characters possess the leader ability, however. So, let's see. Lone operative, which means they can be targeted by range attacks unless their attacker's within 12 inches. Okay, so a lone operative can't be targeted by range attacks unless the attacker's within 12 inches. So
Gotcha.
it's kind of like...
It's a much weaker lookout, sir, but it's better in that I could literally stick, like, my Vindicare assassin, right? I could stick him in the corner of the map, in the back, and he's got the range to hit the whole board. He may not have line of sight, but he's got the range. So I don't need a bodyguard unit now to babysit him to keep him from getting shot at. As long as I can bubble wrap him far enough out, I really only have to worry about deep striking, because no one can target him. It's better and worse than the current lookout, sir, in different ways. But overall, I think it seems fine.
Yeah, so there's some more here. Some characters only gain the lone operative ability when they take shelter near an appropriate unit, such as Iron Father Pharos working on a vehicle, or Lionel Johnson being near a unit of Astartes infantry. So it's kind of like working back to a type of lookout, sir, we had already, but it's more unit specific.
I think that's fine. This goes into some of the stuff I was saying before with, as much as the new edition is going to streamline certain parts, we are definitely not streamlining into simplicity by any means. Like, having all the rules on one page so that we get our data sheet has all the special rules and we don't have to jump around too much. I think that is better, and that's more streamlined. But that definitely, with all the new keywords as far as, like, critical impact and, you know, devastating hit and blah, 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 like, it definitely doesn't mean that we're going simple enough to where it's not the complicated game that we're used to.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, because I think while there's going to be... I think the scoring is going to be sort of the same, maybe streamlined a little bit. It'll be interesting to see if they keep the weird rolling caps on secondaries and how they... Because it's going to be... You're going to be upkeeping that. then there's gonna be a lot more counting. I think is what's gonna happen, where people are gonna be counting models and then multiplying it by their objective control value and doing like that kind of funky math on each objective every turn.
Yep.
That'll get funny. It could also. It'll be interesting to see how Battleshock tests shake out. I think it's okay. I think it can be fast. It's just a matter of how they design it and how easy it is to keep track of in like a tournament setting. I don't think it's going to be as crunchy as 7th edition. I don't think we're going to be putting a template down and putting a second blast template and flipping it a bunch of times for like barrages and stuff, because that could take literally forever. But I also think it's going to get a little interesting, because people say it's going to be like Age of Sigmar, but Age of Sigmar is a lot more streamlined than what some of the things that they're putting out there.
Yeah. I do agree with you on most of that. I do think it's going to be a little more bookkeepy when it comes to tracking the different numbers and some of the like conditional effects that are on them. I don't know that that's bad necessarily, because I mean, arguably, as much as it was complex, 8th and 9th have been very simple compared to like way back when. Like 1st, 2nd, even 3rd was super crunchy. It was super thematic, which is why people didn't mind the crunch, but it was super crunchy back then. I don't think we're going that extreme by any means, but we're definitely going to get some of that crunch. But it should be fine, because we're losing some of that crunch in other places as they streamline like the data sheets and things like that.
Well, so my hope is that they can balance the fluff that comes with the crunchiness and the balance that we want for competitive play, which really just makes the game healthier across the board, even outside of tournaments. The odd part is that how can they balance those two things? If they do it right, it'll be amazing. If they do it wrong, no one will be happy. It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. I think they're doing a lot of good things. It's just a matter of like, okay, we're seeing stat sheets. We need to see more like base function of the game. We need like a demo to really see how it's going to go.
Yeah, and I agree. There's parts of it that I can already kind of see the writing on the wall that like I'm super excited about, because I think it's going to fix some of our like current gripes and issues. There are other parts where like we don't have all the information, right? So there's only so much complaining you can do before you acknowledge that like, but you don't have the information. What are you talking about? But like when like we said before, when you first talk about characters being attached to units, I'm like, okay, we go back to 7th edition and we create these giant Death Stars. And then you go into like, oh, but there's the leader thing. And while there are exceptions, we don't know how many exceptions. There's a limit to how many characters per unit. So like, there's definitely things that can be abused and could get kind of ridiculous with the rules changes that they're making. I don't know that I want to complain about them too much. Not because I don't think that they're worth acknowledging, but because it seems, what little information we have, that they are keeping in mind the previous editions and really, learning from what they've done in the past. Even just looking at 8th and 9th, I felt like 8th edition, they really focused on balancing data sheets, and everybody loved 8th edition because it was so balanced unit for unit and things like that. 9th edition, they really, from my perspective anyway, I guess I'll say, they really balanced the missions. They did really good. They lost some of the balance for the units, which overall didn't necessarily make the game feel more balanced in 9th and 8th, but they really focused on the missions, finding something that was both balanced for competitive play and balanced for casual play. So my whole, before we got into this information, my hope is they just kind of smash an 8th and 9th together, right? Because if you have balance on both ends, even if it's not perfect, you are about as close as you can get to what everybody's been asking for. Now, some of this goes in a different direction than that, but that's not necessarily bad, because maybe those two things can't be perfectly balanced together. I don't know. I want to say they can, but that's all speculation. I haven't done,
Yeah.
anywhere near as much play testing as they have.
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, to me, like 8th was good because we had an index start, so everyone was kind of on a level playing field. Some things stood out, but generally it was pretty balanced. And then we had the Codex release schedule, and there was some things that broke out there, and then we got into Psychic Awakening. But generally, everyone had something to play. Some things were more powerful than others, but the internal balance was really nice. But there were only a few outliers, really. Then we got to the 9th edition, and it was like they tightened up the competitive rules a lot more, but then at the same time, there was a lot more, I want to say, inconsistent codex releases. We'd have one codex that was like way more powerful than another, but also just like internally, some codexes had way more variety and options and like multiple viable builds, and other ones would have like one viable build. And so it just kind of, they've been working fast on, like, as soon as the codex is even like starting to leak, like the Votan one, like they come out immediately and start trying to like fack it, which to some people that looks bad, but to me that just means they're paying attention and trying to balance it, even if their codex writers aren't talking enough with each other for whatever reason. Mind you, 9th edition had to like survive a pandemic and a bunch of other stuff, which totally affected the way playtesting and stuff went, which it's like people forgot about it, which is kind of good, but also I think 9th edition was actually pretty solid. It's just a matter of like playing orcs and playing AdMech. Both my codexes feel like they're in strange places at this point. AdMech is still really difficult to play and kind of behind the curve unless you're just like a super genius and know all the perfect units for every like matchup. And then orcs are just, there's not enough in the codex to use. There's a lot of units, but there's only like a couple builds that work okay. If you're not running the Goth pressure list, there's not really anything left for you to do. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. So one of the things that I'll point out about 9th, and I'm not trying to like sell people on 9th because we're going to 10th and that's what's happening. Like the world's moving on. But one of the things that I've always felt about 9th is whether it's they decided to do this because of the pandemic or whatever else, the real answer is I think 9th was this giant test bed for them. And they knew that it was never going to be like perfect or what people really even wanted. But 9th is really about testing, because they not only were we helping them test the like competitive rules and get the mission pack together, and that's great. But one of the big things is the codexes. In 8th edition, they were trying to find balance, and they did. It was awesome. But in 9th edition, they tested so many weird things that they've never done before. And even if they had done them before, they were testing them in a totally new era of like, attempted balance, right? Because one of the things I remember is it started with the Death Guard Codex, which was, right towards the beginning of, they added how many extra like layers of bonuses can we add before it gets like too complicated and people don't want to deal with it. And then we got the AdMech where it's like, all right, so at the beginning of your turn, you got to do this canonical, and at the end of your turn, you got to do this thing. And like, it was all about like, all right, how much bookkeeping can we get them to do? And there were some codexes that felt like they stood out. And some of those were because, like you said, there was one viable build and it was, very straightforward. It wasn't about complexity. It was just about efficiency. So like, Dark Eldar, just took off because they're like, here's the correct answer. There's no complexity. It's just this, go. And it was really good. And then there was others that were really good because of how complex they were. Like there was Space Marine builds that were, bonus on top of special rule on top of like, the like, I'm in the correct doctrine, which means I get this additional bonus on top of the doctrine itself. There was like so much complexity there that it was good because of how complex it was and how you would catch your opponent off guard. I'm not even saying that's like a good thing to have in the game or a bad thing, but the whole of 9th edition seemed like a giant test bed for them. And maybe it's because of the pandemic or whatever else, but it seems like they were just pushing the envelope in so many different directions that they were just trying to find out, like, all right, what are my actual boundaries, like, in this day and age? And hopefully they, actually took notes of all of that. So now that we're wiping all the codexes and all that weird stuff that they were doing, we're going into 10th. We're going to need some indexes, and it means a slow rollout for, like potentially new codexes and campaign books and stuff like that. But now that they know their boundaries and they know what balance should look like from 8th, I mean, I'm very hopeful for 10th, but I just think it's really interesting of how much they tried to like push weird things in 9th, kind of for no reason other than to see if they could.
Well, I'm hopeful too, actually. I mean, it's more about seeing what they do with it. Every time they write a new core rule system for themselves, you can see kind of their intent. It's just a matter of how's their execution going to be on the codices, you know what I mean? We'll see how it goes. Anyway, I think that's probably all we really have to say about all this character attachment stuff and new edition stuff. Just for anyone watching, I wanted to plug our store. We have an online web store. We do distribution. We have all kinds of fun things. Just take a look. It's gophergames.com. We have a Facebook page and a Discord. Just feel free, chat us up, ask us questions. We're gonna keep doing these as things roll through. Anything you want to add to that, Chris?
Nope. We've taken a little bit of a break from doing some of our videos and battle reports. We've just kind of been busy with Adepticon and some other things, so store's doing a lot. But we'll get back to doing that here soon. So keep an eye out for those videos, just like this one with the tactics stuff. So there should be plenty more of this type of content, as well as the Discord and the store itself.
Yeah, no, there's a lot coming, both convention-wise, release-wise. Just stay tuned. We love seeing everybody out there at conventions and stuff too. Anyway, I hope everyone has a good night, morning, evening, whatever time it is, wherever they are.
Yep, we'll see you next time.
All right, thanks.